welcome to Bendy, a podcast about being flexible in all of the ways that means. Thanks for joining us. My name is Andy Young, and I'm one of your erudite literary hosts. Joining me as always is our other erudite and literary host, Beth Martin. Beth, a pleasure as always. What's the crack?
What the fuck does erudite mean?
It means like learned. Book smart.
I learned you. Is that like a?
I learned.
That's a
yeah.
slang thing from the South. I learned you, like I taught you.
Oh really?
Uh-huh.
I learned you real good.
I learned you real good. Yeah.
I like it.
I know.
You know, I heard a thing, and it's maybe it was a side sort of topic. It was a thing about democracy, and somebody was talking about the challenges of democracy, and they were saying that apparently 1 in 10 Americans think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. Have you heard this?
I have actually.
And it's like it's scary that people who think that are making decisions that affect.
Well, and also it's like, why don't you ask the follow-up question? What about pink milk?
Mm-hmm. It's true,
right? And then they would be like, wait a minute, maybe I'll.
That's why they take out the
right. Think this through.
They take out their shotgun and say, "Get off my land."
We don't need to dive into politics, but it's been a wacky week all over the world. So
it sure has. We had our. We won't get into it too much. We had ours, and
okay.
It was a big swing to.
I'm not going to ask your opinion. Yeah, it was a big deal.
I mean, it was a big deal, and also like the kind of very sort of right wing party didn't get as many seats as they had hoped. There was a big change in Northern Irish politics, or sort of like I think I've talked about it before on the podcast. We have a political party who essentially shut down the Northern Irish government for like 2 years. They've lost a lot of ground, as rightly they should have. So yeah, it's been. I mean, I don't like to get too positive about politics because it's just the same old shit.
It's true.
It's like it's the Simpsons episode. So the Simpsons guide so many of my ways of thinking, but like the Malibu Stacy episode where like Lisa tries to craft this entirely new kind of doll, and then they just have Malibu Stacy now with new hat, and everybody's like, "Oh, but she's got a new hat," and it's like, yeah. So yeah,
I don't know if I saw that episode.
It's so good. Because William Smithers is a big Malibu Stacy fan. He's leading the crowd to get the new doll.
We need to do an episode just on The Simpsons.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I just like to talk about that all day. Just formative for me.
Same. So
what's crack with you this week?
We've been going through, because I'm a horrible parent and I let the kids watch Deadpool. So like. I know. I get bored of the same old shit. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, but there's a school of thought about that. I know people talk about how there's certain like there was 18 movies that you were kind of okay to watch, like Predator, for example, as a kid, and like Die Hard is another kind of good example of one that's like it's got some sketchy stuff in there, but it's a great
Christmas
action movie. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you tired of watching Santa Claus the movie for the 30th time?
So speaking of... basically, like, I guess I'm leading them into Deadpool 3, which is coming out at some time. I know they're, like, publicizing it. So we're doing, like, original X-Men, and then we're going to go, like... with, like, Patrick Stewart. And... I can't help it. Anytime anyone's like, Wolverine, I'm like, there you are.
Yeah.
And then I laugh. And then Mike's like, what are you doing? And I had to explain to him, like, I was like, it's from one of the episodes, and Andy was watching a cartoon about the X-Men in like the 80s?
90s, I'm pretty sure.
Anyways, I don't want to have to rehash that, but it's embedded itself into my... deep into the recesses of my brain that it will never come out. Like, I'll have Alzheimer's someday, and someone will be like, we'll be watching X-Men, and I know I'll be like remembering no one, but I'll be like, there you are.
Or somebody you'll be playing like Canasta or whatever, and somebody is saying you have to discard this card, and you go,
remember it. So the other crack is kind of, I didn't tell you this off pod because I wanted you to be like, yay in real life, but I've graduated to bi-weekly therapy. I
Ooh,
know.
from
Weekly.
what weekly? Nice. Okay, nice. Good for
Well,
you.
actually, there was a point where I was meeting with two different therapists. So now I'm down to
Yeah,
one
once every two
every,
weeks.
yeah, 2 weeks.
Okay,
So a
fortnightly, as they say over here.
fortnight.
Yeah,
Once every fortnight.
good for
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, it's like the
Whereas, you know,
last like 3 weeks of sessions, or the last three sessions, like, I haven't really had a lot to talk about. And
yeah, it's good.
she's like, do you have any questions? And I'm like, no. She's like, do you want to, like, kind of like, what are we talking about? And so I was like, is it time to maybe? And she was like, it is. And like, this is a big deal.
Awesome.
You don't need, like, I'm not having freakouts as often, and like things that were maybe a bigger deal to me 6 months ago. Like, I'm able to manage my shit better.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
feels
huge.
good.
I'm really happy to hear
Yeah.
it. That's awesome.
I wish I could like give you my other weekly therapy appointment with her, but
Yeah. Like so, like I mean, and I've had a good therapist in this country. I could definitely do a therapy now, but I can't afford
I know.
it. But like
That's
I
that's not
had
what I
I
was
had a
saying.
great.
Like, you need therapy. I
No, I
just
know,
like,
I know.
it's not
Yeah, yeah. Whereas I could
available.
be doing it. I could be doing it with like daily therapy. um, oh, we laugh. We laugh
We
through the
do
tears.
heartily.
So I had some really good in-person therapists as well. But like over here, I don't know. I've not been crazy about the mental health resources in this country, just in terms of my experience with it. But like your therapist sounds awesome. I've got my friend in Jersey. He's got a therapist, and he like keeps recommending like video games that my friend should play, and I'm like, God damn it, this get me this guy as well. So yeah, but we soldier on.
We do.
Um, so with me, I was telling Beth before we came on here, I have been doing some dog sitting. So I have a cockapoo in the house. He's a sweet boy. He's a wee bit skittish. And he's also an escape artist, so I have
Oh,
to, like, ordinarily I leave the back door unlocked, not open but unlocked, but he would get out, so I've had to lock the door so he doesn't escape anywhere. And as a result, because you need some space, Sasha is currently at my feet, cowering. The dog doesn't hassle her; she's just kind of like, "Whoa, bro, what are you doing? Are you trying to replace me? What's going
right.
on? I'm
And
here. Look how pretty I am."
for Americans, purring is cowering.
Mm. Thank you for being my American
You're
translator.
welcome.
Um, I also went sea swimming on Saturday, which was nice. I
Sea
did wear a
swimming.
wetsuit.
That's
Yes.
what you call it?
Mm-hmm. Just to be specific about where I was doing
Right.
it, right? Because if it was just swimming in a pool, it's like, who cares?
Right.
But I think actually going into the water, especially in this country, because it's the
Really
water
cold.
here never gets really warm in any measurable shape. But like it was nice. It was one of these things. I'm going to do it. I'm like,
Do you wear a wet?
what have I
Do you
done?
wear a
Why?
wetsuit?
Yes,
Okay,
I
good.
do.
Okay, good.
Because I don't like my friend who I went in with. Like she didn't like but I was like, you know what, fair play to you. But like I have done this enough times. I have like swam in kind of the winter in like Donegal, which is like on the east coast of
Hmm.
Ireland, and I can do it, but I hate it.
Yeah.
And it's like I just rather not do something that I hate. But it was nice. We went in a couple of times. Sasha was there. She loves swimming. She joined us. So it was nice, and I'm glad I did it. It really it took me a couple of goes to kind of like feel the benefit of it. I think my second trip in, our second, like, because you come out the first time, you're like,
Uh huh.
fuck this, I'm done, I'm never doing this again. And I was talking to going in a second time and really quite enjoyed it the second time.
Your
So
body
it
like
was,
acclimates. It's like you're doing
yeah,
ice therapy, but with a wetsuit on.
yeah,
Is
exactly.
your
I
wetsuit an O'Neill? Oh,
No,
okay.
it's some sort of generic brand. It was like I can't, because like I knew I wouldn't use it loads, but it's still quite nice. And I have used it in recent years for like paddle boarding and things like
Yeah.
that.
paddleboarding in a wetsuit,
Um,
assuming you're going to fall
yeah.
off.
Uh-huh. Because, and again, just not wanting to like get in the cold ass water in this country,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, and like, other than that, just kind of trying to figure out summer trips. I was talking to Beth about that ahead of time, so I'm just kind of trying to piece that together now because I need a trip or I'm going to go crazy.
Yay!
Er.
Yeah,
So yeah.
we've got one planned in 3 weeks.
Oh yeah.
So we'll be heading to the South Pacific again.
Nice.
And we're going to a more remote island. Have I talked about this on pod already?
I don't think on the pod.
Okay.
No, I know we've talked about it.
So yeah, it's like you got to fly to Tahiti, and then you got to take like a 4-hour ferry boat. But I guess it's there's a term for high winds in Tahitian that I can't remember, but it's really fun to say. Anyways, it's winter there, so the winds are high, so it's probably going to be pretty barfy. Do you get like boat sick?
Yes.
Yeah. So do my
I
children.
have been in some brutal like sea journeys as well, like, and they're no fun.
No, I have too. But I'm usually okay, like. But my children are not, and Mike is not. So I think we're probably gonna like take the ferry there and then like fly back, because he was like, yeah. Anyways, but it's like where Polynesians go to holiday when they want to get away from everyone. Okay. So we'll see. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Yeah.
So I have an occurrence that also has to do with your Andy's. What is it?
Andy's Down with the Streets.
Down with the Streets. So someone responded to cap and no cap, and they were like, no cap means not lying. Yes. And I was like, yeah. And so then I looked up the origin, because like because you are who you are and you're like way hipper than me, and now that I'm here, and now I'm hearing it everywhere all the time, and I'm like, damn it, he's so hip and with it. So I looked up its origin. And it has to do with gold teeth being a capped tooth or a solid gold tooth.
Like, so the fake nature of what the caps are.
So it's like a cap is like not a real gold tooth, and a solid gold tooth is no cap, it's real. So
that's awesome. I love that. I had no idea that's what it was. I know. That's so cool. I haven't had any new ones recently. I'll have to see if I can.
You did fit, you did cap and no cap. Yeah, so I mean, get with it.
I also did Yoda as well.
Oh yeah, Yoda. That's right.
I have before, like I established the format, or that you said that it was a new sort of segment. I definitely have talked about other slang terms that I've liked in the past. Yes, I feel like I'm bound to.
Yes.
It's the sort of thing that always amuses me and makes me kind of really happy to kind of like the one. And I don't think it ever really caught on, but I remember Stephen Fry, who I'm sure you're aware of, talking about on his show how, like, because of like autocorrect on phones, and this was like years and years ago. So whenever people would type in "cool," it autocorrected to "book," and as a result, "book" became replacement for "cool" for a long time. And I was like, that's great. I love it. It makes me very happy.
Wow. Well, and it's also. I mean, I think we probably talked about this, but like I was reading how slang used to really, it was more culturally based, but now we're all like on the internet, and so slang is now not so much as to where your geographic location is, but kind of like how
like everything's become. Yeah, right. Always like much more homogenized. You know, somebody made the observation. I can't remember where I saw this about the fact that like there really aren't new sort of movements these days in terms of like in kids. Like, so you know, there was punk music, there was like goths and things like that, but there aren't any. There's no new ones really. There you see revivals of some of these things, but like and that's sad, I think, in a way. And I think that probably, the overall nature of everything being so connected has stopped that sort of, these sort of,
Pockets.
subgroups kind of,
Yeah.
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 And I think we've lost something with that,
I would absolutely
but
agree. I would absolutely agree. It's a
uh,
lot of, and not, I'm not trying to like denigrate music that's coming out and people love, but
yeah.
um I'll talk about this a little bit later, but this ties into our
Mm-hmm.
topic. I'm reading Storyteller by Dave Grohl, which I've talked about on the pod.
Yeah.
And like that was coming off of, I mean, it was like pop music was in, and then all of a sudden it was like this undercurrent of, um, you know, young people just not wanting to conform and not feeling
Yeah.
like they're part of something. And like Nirvana, obviously, but like
Yeah, the grunge
grunge
movement. I
movement
mean, I
was
hate
like
that
huge,
word, but
huge.
yeah.
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 So it definitely, it's like I'm kind of waiting for the next thing that will throw
Yeah.
people. Like the Beatles was a
But
thing, and like you can actually pinpoint
yeah.
those moments in history, and maybe it's just going to take longer. I don't know. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't. Yeah. It's interesting. Um. But yeah. Um. Shall we move on to our topic?
Yes,
Do you think?
yes, yes. I'm
All right.
excited.
Sweet. So, um, we're moving. So our topic this week, and we're calling it bookworms.
Bookworms.
And because I'm dedicated, it has a Z at the end. Yeah, that's right, a Z. Right,
Z.
deal with it. Deal with it, American listeners. um, so just to talk about books and what they mean to us, I guess. We want books that we like. It's just a conversation about it. And before we even started this, like I was saying to Beth, I feel like this like it's something I could talk about for hours and hours and hours. This is something we could potentially come back to because it's such a huge scope in terms of if you think about books. I think I remember being posed a question years ago, which was like if you could take some sort of
Ooh.
form of entertainment, for to a desert island, and that would be video games and music and blah blah blah. What the one that I always would take would be books. I would find myself endlessly entertained by them. I think what they could do and the range that you would have. It would be books would be my number one sort of form of entertainment. I think, and I think I don't think that's ever going to change. So yeah, I love them.
I mean, I agree. I've always been a reader. I've never, I mean, in school, I wasn't so good at the math, but I
I
was
hear you.
really good at reading
Yeah,
and
me
talking
too.
about books. And I was an English major for a while, and then I ended up being a humanities major, which is basically the same thing, just with
Yeah,
more like history and all of the arts in one. But I love books. I love reading. I love how time slips away when you're like in another universe in your brain. And um, I remember like as a kid, even it was summer, I was bored, and my parents were like, go read. And I'd be like, okay. And I would like, this is disgusting. I don't even know why I'm telling you this. I would go and I would get Tillamook cheese, which I know Andy's had because I think I forced you.
mm-hmm.
And I would grate a bowl of
Mm-hmm.
cheese, and then I would get 2 apple juice boxes, and I would get in the hammock, and I would sit there and I would have my juice boxes and eat my grated cheese and read books. And it was like the happiest place ever.
Absolutely, that sounds
I
right.
know. So also
Yeah, I
food
love
and
it.
books, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's true. Yeah, it's such a timeless combo.
Right.
Um, yeah, like I mean I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna talk generally. I think we've got like a few questions we're gonna ask each other. We'll then maybe get into a bit more
Yeah.
detail on some of the books that we
Yeah.
like, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah.
But as I say, I could probably this podcast could be 5 hours
Yeah.
long, and I could still probably do the same again next
Yep.
week.
Yep. Agreed.
Um, do you have any? Do you want to kick us off with something?
Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna do some bigger like category questions.
Uh huh.
Um, do you prefer like happy books or sad books?
Oof, that's a good question.
Thanks.
I
That's why I
don't.
pay myself nothing for this.
That's it. That's why. Yeah, that's why we're in the big
That's
bucks,
right.
right? Um, who I think probably Happy Books. I think that I probably prefer more like miserable TV shows. Like I do like comedies, but I like things that kind of like even in comedies like delve into like darker areas. So like I think I by and large like positive books, if not positive, maybe like that have like a heroic arc, you know what I mean, that sort of thing. If those are the sort of books I'm reading at the time, that's definitely something I lean towards for sure. I think that's what excites me about a lot of the kind of certainly a lot of the fiction books that I read.
Mm-hmm.
What about
I
you?
think I tend to read. That's another question, like fiction or nonfiction, which we can get
Yeah,
into. But I think I tend to read more, not sad, but true books.
yeah,
So probably lean more towards nonfiction. And that's not to say I don't love going to other worlds and like reading sci-fi and reading um other, genres, but typically like I'm looking at my list and like yeah, these are pretty meaty, heavy, sad books.
yeah,
But I'm a pretty happy person.
yeah. I mean, I think I as well. I look at like some of the ones I've written down here, and I definitely like dip into both sides of
Yeah.
that. Do you know what I mean? But they're ultimately uplifting. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And they ultimately like end in a positive place. I think I
Do
think
you prefer fiction to nonfiction?
probably
Yeah.
yeah. I I definitely like a mixture of stuff. But like I think if I read nonfiction, it's oftentimes like um something like The Body Keeps the Score,
Right.
or books on like I try to like dabble and read like quantum physics books every now and again,
Ooh,
those
you're
sorts of
so
things.
smart.
Aren't I so smart? Yeah, he's so smart, isn't he? Isn't that Andy guy so smart? I have my opinion on quantum physics though is, and I've recommended to people, is that I don't think it is difficult at an academic level. It's more conceptually it's tough, and I think that if you and especially as I've kind of I've talked before with people who I think that like quantum physics has kind of led me towards yoga, because like a lot of the thinking with yoga is very
Yeah.
similar, and I think that's what's tough, and I think that people who have immersed themselves in the kind of yoga world would find a lot of interesting stuff in quantum physics. And also it's like also for like people who like suck and who are like, oh, that's a load of nonsense, they still kind of respect quantum physics, and you can kind of go, well, a lot of quantum physics experiments kind of back up some of the kind of loopier things that yoga kind of gets into,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of, I mean, partially shuts them off. It doesn't really, they've always had some sort of comeback, but
So, what's your favorite book? If you had
oh
to pick one.
no.
Oh no.
That's a tough one. I think it's I really struggle with that question in any medium in terms of movie, or I think I've got a favorite comic book by, or so many, or like favorite band, all those sorts of things, because I feel like it changes constantly.
Can I rephrase the question?
Sure.
What's a book that like shocked you?
Um, I would say Fear and Loathing in Las
Mm-hmm.
Vegas kind of blew my head off in terms of what a book could be. I thought it was I thought the energy, both like structurally and the energy of that book, really kind of was great for me in terms of opening my mind to the possibilities of like writing, really, and that stayed with me. Um, yeah, another one that it was immediate. What I was going to go to is probably The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay,
I've
which
never
is
heard of that.
a so Michael Chabon.
No.
Okay, so some of his works have been turned into movies. So Wonder Boys.
Yeah.
Do you know the movie Wonder
do.
Boys? Okay, so he wrote
Okay.
that, and he's written some other stuff, but Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Why it works for me so well is essentially the kind of it's about this kind of these cousins, and they escape. Sort of one of the cousins in particular escapes from like World War II Germany and kind of moves to New York, and he like meets his cousin who's been living there, and they come together and they create like a comic book company. But they kind of go through all the ins and outs of what that is, like the ups and downs, and it just read, because I'm such a big comic book fan, because it leans so heavily on, the Stan Lee sort of story in a lot of ways. I mean, it took elements of that. It really was really resonant for me, and it's like I don't think I've ever reread a book, but it's the only one that I have debated rereading.
You've never reread a book?
No.
I don't
really see the point.
I do a lot of it.
Really? Yeah, I know a lot of people do.
Yeah. It's like watching, it's probably like rereading a graphic novel and then being like, oh my God, I missed this. Or I didn't understand this at the time, and now this makes so much more sense. Like now that I'm at a different age, or like I've gone through this experience.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So I found that and I have a list of my rereads that I reread, probably once every year or two. And it's like, part of it is I have a hard time finding books that like captivate me 100%.
I hear you.
And so the ones that I know that captivate me 100%, I know I can go back to, and just like when I need to dip into that part of my brain and just like go on a little mini vacation and just like chill the fuck out and relax and like lay in my bed and read, I know these are the ones that I can just go to and get back in the story and like see again and understand in a totally different way.
I like that. I think what stops me is just, reading a book is such an undertaking. Like, I mean, I can read a comic book in, a couple of days pretty handily and enjoy it. Like, give it time and enjoy it. Whereas, like, a book is a much bigger time investment for me. And
totally.
I think about all the books that I want to read, and I will never be able to read them all in my lifetime. So which is why I don't tend to go back, really.
I understand that.
Some shorter stuff, maybe, but yeah, not really.
Are there any books that made you mad, reading them? Where you're like, oh, this character, or like this story, or like, why did they do that?
Did you give me your favorite book before we move on?
No, I didn't.
It's just
it's probably a lot of people's favorite book, but my favorite book of all time is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's one I've reread.
I like. Yeah, and what I like, it's such an incredible you mic drop. Here's this incredible book that I've written, and just kind of walked away, and it was like, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and that's part. It's like that's part of it too. It's like Harper Lee had. We all have one story in us, right?
Yeah.
But hers was so, at least for the United States of America, like it was so meaty and full and well written and dealt with a really hard set of topics through the eyes of children. And I loved that. And the movie's also great. So, and I named my daughter after the author of the book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a corker. So you asked me if
books that made you mad.
There was any books that made me mad. I'm struggling to think. I think I've definitely hated characters. I think I love a kind of an effectively written bad guy who I absolutely despise. But I don't think any books made me mad. I think that if it's making me mad, I'm probably not enjoying it, and I would probably quit it. And I definitely have. I used to be a lot worse for just because I try whenever I was a young pretentious or an old pretentious teenager, I should say. and I was trying to read like, worthy books, like Crime and Punishment and things like that. And that book is so leaden. It's it's such a tough read, and it was just making me miserable. So that book kind of made me mad, and it was just like, why am I doing this to myself? And that was just an important lesson in my reading sort of life as well. And I just kind of like put it down, and never never went back to it.
So I don't know if I've ever read Crime and Punishment. I've heard of it. Don't. Yeah, you're like, don't waste your time.
Oh, I also tried to read some. Oh no, actually, I'm going to figure out his name. Sorry, do you have one? And
Yeah,
I'll go back.
Go back into your mind garden. So okay, A Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, I quite like that book, but yeah, I can understand.
I read it probably 4 or 5 times just to make sure that I was like really not, because we had to read it first. Like we had to read it for school, like in like in our late teens, and then I think I read it again in college, and then a couple times after that. But I just don't like Holden Caulfield.
I understand that he is kind of an asshole.
I get like misunderstood youth and like, but calling everyone phony, and I get it was the time,
yeah,
and that was like the slang, but I just didn't like him, and I didn't think that he got the point.
Yeah, I think you're.
Which is probably me not getting the point, and I understand that too. The other one is John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, which is really well written, and it's one that I reread. It's about these hikers that go up and they hike Mount Everest during one of the worst weather years, and like most of the hiking party died. And I have this whole thing. If I've already talked about it, I'm sorry, about Mount Everest and like people who climb Mount Everest and
we did
the death zone. And so that's one that I reread it, but it makes me angry. I'm like, why are you doing this? And like, the author of this book went on this hike for, I think it was Nature Magazine or Outdoor Magazine.
Yeah.
And they like paid for him to go on this thing and like check it out and see what it was like, and then it turned into this whole other thing, and they actually made it into a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's just like so fucking sad.
Yeah.
And yeah, so don't climb Mount Everest, John Krakauer.
I think no, absolutely not. This is a good piece of advice for anybody listening. Do not climb Mount Everest. The other one that has occurred to me, maybe slightly controversial, is that I tried to read A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I found Oscar Wilde's writing really kind of florid and pretentious, and I didn't find it engaging at all, and really was just got maybe 50, 60 pages into it and was just like, yeah, this is not for me.
Did you try the autobiography of a yogi?
No.
It was it's very pretentious and like, I'm the best ever, and
who is that by?
Why don't you look in your mind garden?
Oh yeah, okay, there you go. It's
yes.
It's not helping me much.
No,
I must
not.
say.
I'm not going to mispronounce it.
Paramasana Yogana.
Yogana.
That's as far as I'm willing to go.
But it's basically like, this is kind of like, this is, I'm the most amazing, and this is how I live the perfect life, and so can you, kind of thing.
Ugh,
and it's
gross.
just not my jam. So yeah.
The one I was thinking of, because I was trying to like think about this, was, did you have a favorite book in school that was like required reading? And what would that have been? Would that have maybe been To Kill a Mockingbird?
That would be number one. Number two, the one that shocked me that was required reading was Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
And that I remember, I like, only a few times in my life have I not been able to put a book down. And I was like up at like, I was like probably like 13, awake at 4 a.m, unable to stop reading this book. And I just, what a concept. If you haven't read it, you totally should.
Yeah.
It's basically a book about what happens if a bunch of kids get left on a deserted island and have to fend for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's about, I think a lot of what I read is about the human condition.
Yeah.
That's why I'm majored in humanities. That's
Yep.
fascinating to me, and the way that this book was written and the way that they portray the human condition and the positives and the negatives and how far people will go in one direction.
Yeah.
Like it reminds me of Apocalypse Now, or which is
Yeah.
based on the Heart of Darkness. So yeah, that's that for me. What about you?
I think that's no. I know. I think that that's definitely something we share. I think in like all sort of forms of entertainment, like I even the shows that I watch that kind of add a bit more shade to the human condition. All of my like absolute favorite shows are really kind of deep dives into that. I think
Yeah,
but yeah, absolutely. So the book for me was so we had to do. I don't know whether this would have been the same for you, folks in the US, but we had to do like some Jane Austen and things like
we did.
that. And I never
Yeah.
really clicked with Jane Austen's writing, but we also did Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton,
Mm-hmm.
which was tremendous and just kind of really blew me away. And I think probably because it was so good and I found it so compelling that Jane Austen just seemed quite lacking to me in comparison to
Yep.
that, and it really stayed with me, and I just found it so really powerful and engaging.
I never read the book, but I've seen the movie like probably
Yeah,
10 or 15 times.
yeah.
And what was that, Martin Scorsese?
I was Scorsese, yep.
To pick that up and
Daniel Day Lewis,
yeah,
Michelle
yeah.
Pfeiffer, yep. Hmm.
It was uh wonderful. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, and it was another thing that really kind of changed my opinion on what fiction can be as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
this was still early doors for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was like figuring out
And period
what
period
books had to offer.
totally period pieces are hard.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's talk about corsets and like,
Yeah.
gentle manners, genteel manners.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a tragic but beautiful
It
story.
is. It is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very good. I thought. Um. So, do you have another one? Do you have
Do
a
audiobooks
question?
count as books?
I think they do, but I don't tend to listen to audiobooks. But I absolutely think that they do.
Yeah, I think they do too. I think anything, and this is just like anything that gets people to air quote read
Yes,
counts. So,
agreed.
yeah.
I, it still kind of surprises me the amount of people that like don't read or don't haven't built up the reading habit. When I think it's getting more prominent as time goes on. I come across more people who've like never really like cracked a book in any sort of meaningful way apart from it in school and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I don't know. I think it's just and no judgments on those people because it's just a habit that some people don't pick up. But I would be lost without it. I so look forward to like reading a book. I like the book that I'm reading at the minute. I'm excited to get back to it. You know what I mean? And it's such a nice. I'm always reading a book. I've always got one on the
That
go in
was,
some sort of
yeah, that
capacity.
was my other question. It's like, how many do you read at a time?
If we count comic books, I don't know if we do, but I
Yeah.
always have at least one. I think I always have at least one comic and one book in the go at a time. I always do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so two, I guess. I don't think I sometimes crack into another if I'm like trying to like learn
Mm-hmm.
something, but by and large, I with my regular book reading, I try to have like an educational book every now and again too to kind of mix things up.
Mm-hmm. I'll go through like, so usually I'll have an audiobook that I listen to
Mm-hmm.
because you know me and I hate being in my own brain. So whenever I'm like doing
Yes.
stuff, I'll be listening, like take the dog for a walk, listen to an audiobook. I don't typically, I listen to audiobooks almost exclusively. I don't really listen to podcasts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's because we're doing one and I get my fix this way. because ours is the best.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why bother with any other ones? But like,
So true.
but so I've always got an audiobook going, and then I usually have like a book that I'm super invested in, and then one that I'm kind of like got a lazy eye on, but it's not quite like picking it up steam. And
Yeah.
I'll just kind of like keep going back to it like every couple weeks and then read a few more pages and see if it picks up. And then if it doesn't, then I'll find another one.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it took me a while to get to that stage where I was able to like give up on a book. I mean, apart from like a few like early follies, I really used to like would like grind through a book even if I wasn't feeling it, because it was like, well, I've started this, but now I'm just like, it's just not worth it. Like, and especially if it's pretty written.
That was like one of my questions. Like, what was a book that you just couldn't finish?
I have, well, I suppose, like, say Crime and Punishment, Dorian Gray, or Picture of Dorian Gray. I also like I tried to read, I can't remember the name of the author, so it's the guy that wrote The Three Body Problem, and the thing that's on Netflix at the minute.
Is it a documentary?
Converted into like no, it's a fiction show. Okay. And he also did The Wandering Earth.
Okay.
And he is a Chinese author, and like his books are sort of like sci-fi-ish, I think. Mm-hmm. But like I don't know whether it was the translation or the writing was terrible, but I started reading A Wandering Earth and I made like 60 pages into it, and I was like, this is so bad. I'm not engaging with this at all, and just kind of like put it down. That's the one in recent memory anyway.
Yeah, basically mine is like every book that I had a book club for a while that I was in. Basically every book that we all picked, I just couldn't.
Oh really?
Yeah. I couldn't finish.
Like, I wonder, and I don't want to like,
unless it was like
aspersions, but like
Chelsea Handler or someone like gave me mercy that month. It was just like heavy shit always.
But I think that's kind of the problems with certain book clubs, especially if people are picking, because it might need to be a bit sort of performative, as in like, I need to show that I'm intellectual sort of thing,
a lot.
Which I think is a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Whereas like, give me that trash. Do you know what I mean? Like, I do like something that makes me think, but I do also like some enjoyable garbage that is like such a page turner.
Right.
I'm trying to remember the name of it. Like, one of my all-time favorite reads was a book called Ice Station Zero, I think I want to say.
Station Zero?
Maybe not. No. I'll try and remember the name of the book, or the author and the book, but it was essentially like a movie, like an action movie, but written as a book, and it was about this guy who goes up to like the Arctic and gets like, and it's essentially just action, wall to wall action. And I still remember the one of the scenes where there was like a hovercraft chase, and at one point our hero puts his hovercraft in reverse and has like two machine guns, and he's shooting right out of the window at the other hovercraft. And like, the author is so pleased with this image, he's kind of like, he writes it and then he's like, so just so you know, he's driving backwards and shooting two machine guns out of it. And I'm like, yeah. And like, that book I read over lunch breaks, and I must have put away like, it was like 400 or 500 pages, and I must have put it away in like a week, because it was such a brisk read, because it was like mostly that and a few occasional kind of like scenes back in Washington with all these like stuffed suits, but there's this one guy and he's a maverick and he's fighting against the system, and I'm like, oh man, this was so good. Makes me laugh a lot.
Okay, so what's the saddest book you've ever read?
That's a good question. So one of the stuff, so some of the things I've written down, and I think that they really kind of take you on a journey. I have always really quite enjoyed John Irving's books. Like
me too.
I like Cider House Rules and World According to Garp. Both plunge you into awful places.
Yes, totally. Oh my god, like, that was so. I have favorite author list, and John Irving is on.
Mm-hmm. He's so good.
Yeah.
He's I've always found his books. I've only read two, maybe three. Those are the two that I remember I definitely have read.
Okay.
I love
You
them.
need, if you
And
haven't read A Prayer for Owen Meany, you need to.
I haven't.
Okay,
Okay.
that was my intro to John Irving. And then I was like,
Okay.
and then I
Okay.
read everything he ever wrote.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because he's got a fair amount, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's got quite a few books, doesn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah, yeah.
And
But I think because they were the ones, the big names, because there were movies have been made for them, and even like before my time, so that's why I kind of was aware of them. But I adored them, like absolutely adored them.
Yeah, I reread those. So I still have my copy of A Prayer for Owen Meany from when I was 17 on my bookshelf.
Nice.
It's
Okay.
so
Wow.
good. It's so good.
He feels like such a big sort of important like American writer. Like he really
Yeah.
deals well with the sort of American, I don't know, the world. The world of oh no, I don't know what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I mean, it's definitely it's. There are a lot of people here that have never heard of him, just because
Yeah.
like he went to a private prep school. He
Mm-hmm.
like these themes that run through his books, like wrestling.
Yes.
Private school, living in whatever area of the world that he lives in the United States. I can't remember. It's on the East Coast, but it's like um, you can see it just in reading like his Wikipedia page how much he actually puts into his fiction books,
Yeah.
which I adore. So yeah, that's a good.
Do
That's a
you
good
have
one.
what's your saddest?
It's called Where the Red Fern Grows.
Okay, I've not heard of
Okay,
it.
I don't remember who it's by. Maybe you can look in your mind garden and find out. But
Okay.
it's a story about this kid that has this like he has these two hunting dogs, and their names are Old Dan and Little Ann, and like they all have these little adventures, and he loves these dogs so much. And then like at the end, it's like basically any book where the animal dies. Both
Yeah, I
dogs
hear you.
die, and like I think little Anne dies first and like in a horrible way, like the raccoon like guts her or something, and like her innards are everywhere, and like her intestines, and like I think it was, I don't know, high school reading this. It doesn't matter. Scarred me for life.
Yeah,
But
like
and like,
same
but they
Bobby.
bury
Yeah.
the dog, and then the other dog is like can't live without the other dog and just like
Oh.
dies too, and you're just like crying.
Oh.
And then like they bury them next to each other, and then there's a red fern that grows between the graves, and that's where the kid as it gets older like goes and like will visit it's horrible. I'm sad
That
talking
sounds
about it, I
heartbreaking.
know.
Yeah.
So
Um.
don't write books that where the animals die, please, everyone.
No.
World.
Thank you. Humans die, no
I know,
problems.
it's
But
like
animals, no
Charlotte's
thank
Web,
you.
like don't kill the spider.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Um. So I Oh yeah, so the book that I was talking about earlier, with the action book, was literally just called Ice Station by an author called Matthew Riley, and he has written just tons of these books, which is just like, action movies but in book form,
Mm-hmm.
and they are very entertainment. I think that like, and I haven't read any of these books, like the Reacher books and stuff, for
I haven't
example. I
either.
think are in that sort of
Yeah.
area, I
Yeah.
think. But I'm sure people will be like, no, Reacher is much more complex and interesting a character. And I'm like, I've seen the Amazon show. I don't think that's exactly true. Um,
Is that the one with the
so
guy from The Office?
no, it's what's his Jason or something Richmond, Alan Richmond, I think is the guy's name.
No, the star on the Amazon show. Is it the guy from the not The Office? Yeah, The Office, the American Office.
The Amazon show is a guy called Alan Richin, I
Okay, never
think, or
mind.
Richmond.
Never mind.
Okay, I
It
think.
doesn't matter.
So well, I guess I was like, do you have any other sort of books that like maybe changed your sort of outlook on the world, or like subtly shifted things?
Yeah, I read this. This is another reread. It's by this lady named Cleo Oudzer, and it's called Goa
Mm-hmm.
Freaks. And it's
Okay.
about her living in Goa, India during like the 1960s.
That sounds familiar.
I've probably told you about
Yeah.
it. And it's like a whole like drug party scene, and it was a bunch of just people that wanted to drop out of, what was going on in the world and just live in the utopia.
Uh-huh.
It's probably kind of like what the movie The Beach was trying to, and that was probably based
I
on the
see.
book.
So,
Yeah, but like they created this utopia for a very short time.
and then all turned to shit.
Um, yeah, I mean, like the babies that were born there and were raised there, like all ended up being Republicans, and I think
Of course.
she ended up getting like she did well, like she was in Mensa, ended up getting her doctorate on another book that she wrote called Pat Pong Sisters about living in Thailand and the sex trade. But like, I didn't know, and I guess this was like when I was like experimenting in life, and I was like, I didn't know that you could do life like that and like go somewhere completely
Yeah.
different and try something completely new. And like, granted, she was like running drugs in suitcases and in her hair, and like, uh I've probably never done those things.
Yeah.
Or maybe, whatever, but like I the it was just it blew my mind. It blew my mind.
Yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
one. That's
And
interesting.
there's like all
That
these
sounds great.
pictures of the people that she was living with, and it was like just this utopian community, and I thought it was super cool.
Yeah. That sounds very cool,
What
actually.
about
It does. It
you?
looks very interesting.
Yeah.
Um. So, like, probably a few. Um. Yeah, the one that I was thinking of when I asked you this was when I read Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez,
Yes.
and I think it was a tough book to get into, but once I got into it, I couldn't stop, and it really transformed what I thought of as a love story or a romance book. I mean, like, and it essentially is like that, but it was just so beautifully handled, and you know, really made me kind of re-examine relationships and all that sort of stuff, in kind of quite a cool way.
Mm-hmm.
But it really kind of yeah, very much changed my outlook on the world. It was such a bit, and I've been trying to read 100 Years of Solitude. I've got like about 100 pages or so into it, and it just hasn't grabbed me. And I will make another stab at that in the future. I just wasn't in the right frame of mind for it. But I think it was a really beautiful book.
Mm-hmm. I'm all, this lady did drugs. I liked it. And you're like,
No, but like also like Dice Man is another really dumb one where a guy starts living his life by the rules of the dice, and I thought that was mind blowing. It
wow.
gets really dumb at times, but like it was also like just writing the book based on the rule of the dice. It's another one that's like unconventional narrative. It's what I love, and it's why like whenever you recommend A Princess Bride to me,
Mm-hmm.
I would, it's exactly the sort of thing I enjoy. Also things like Flowers for Algernon, which is like so cool. So if you don't know what that is, folks, it's basically a book where a guy with like learning difficulties is experimented on, and he is the one writing the book. So like the writing is sort of fairly basic and simple initially with like spelling mistakes and stuff, but as this like wonder drug works on him, the writing gets like more crisper, more precise, like more florid, and then it eventually starts to grate. Oh, I don't want to spoil the book, but it's such an interesting, it's a very short book. It's definitely well worth a read. But it's again such an interesting like use of the form, which really kind of, again, Fear and Loathing's another great one. So yeah, they all really kind of stayed with me.
Mm-hmm. Um, what book did you find to be the scariest?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't tend to read scary
Huh.
books. So I'm not a big like horror fan really. So I might have to think about that one. Do you have one?
Um, it obviously
Yeah.
by Stephen King, and that like I read probably in middle school, so I was probably in my teens. But I remember my dad telling someone about the book, uh, and I was listening when I was around 8.
Uh-huh.
So that was like an early one. And then there's another one called Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. I love me some Anne Rule.
Mm-hmm.
She's a former, she passed away, but she's a former police officer and would take these cases and would write about them. And instead of writing a murder book, she would actually turn the book into she manages to make every person in this story that actually happened so human. Their likes, their dislikes, their hobbies, who their friends were. So I feel like she does a really good job of that. But she, early in her career, she was running, or she was volunteering for a suicide hotline. And her
Mm-hmm.
friend was Ted Bundy and was also
Wow.
volunteering for the suicide hotline. And they were friends throughout his entire murder spree and convictions and escape from prison and all of that. And it's an incredible story of someone that
That's
actually
nuts.
knew him and has letters from him and corresponded with him, when he was in prison. I think he even asked her to be there when he was executed and she declined. And so it's just this story about how even someone as well versed in crime, former police officer, still didn't know that it was him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that's how good
Yeah.
he was. So that freaked me out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So are you?
Uh,
That's my question. Are you a serial killer? I need to ask.
am I a serial killer? I'll never tell. Uh, no, like hey, I've been thinking about getting into it for years. I just don't have the
I
time.
know. You're just too busy.
I'm too busy.
You're
I mean, I'd
dog
love
sitting.
to. Yeah, I'm dog sitting. I'd love to get into it, but I just don't have the time. I the one I thinking about it, and I think it's funny you talking about crime reporting. I remember like reading like some of David Simon's books, the guy that did The Wire,
Mm-hmm.
and like just the kind of real life nature of his like crime reporting really kind of unsettled me. He is such an incredible writer, unsurprisingly, but like that was I found unsettling. But the thing that I went through my list there, and I was thinking the one that I wrote down. So there's an author called Ian Banks, and I think he's more well known in the UK than the US, but he writes fiction under Ian Banks, and he writes science fiction under Ian M. Banks. And I think his science fiction is like I do like a bit of sci-fi. Is some of the best sci-fi there is. It's absolutely my favorite. But he wrote some fairly famous sort of fiction books. One called Wasp Factory, which was very very big. But he wrote one called Complicity, which I think was turned into a movie. But what really got under my skin about Complicity and why it stays with me is that it's written chapter by chapter. And one chapter is about like this journalist investigating these killings. The other chapters are the killer committing the murders or whatever. But those chapters are written in first person. So it's like you open the door, you
Yeah.
walk into the house, you open the door to the bed, and it's like, oh no! And then whenever they're killing somebody, it's like you run your hands around their neck, and it's just about it. Everything about that made me freak out, but it was very effective. I thought.
So you're definitely not a serial killer.
No, I don't have the right stuff.
No, you
Apparently,
don't. You don't. It's good.
nuts.
um. So I guess we're hitting time. So I just want to.
Yeah.
Is there like, who are your favorite authors? Where you're like,
Um,
ooh, if someone like writes a new one, you're like, yes.
I I don't think about authors like that. Like I really love Michael Chabon. I've probably read more of his books than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that wrote Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. I really like Ian M. Banks, who was just talking about a minute ago. He's dead unfortunately. But I don't think there is anybody who I'm like engaged enough with that I'm always excited for their new book to come out. It's I just kind of I access books in odd ways and like things and I also tend to I made the mistake of reading so much Terry Pratchett as a kid that I sickened myself on him, And it really was a lesson to me to not really indulge too much in one author. And so Michael Chabon's probably the closest it has got for me.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about his writing in nearly every one of his books. He writes a chapter or a paragraph that I'm like, holy shit. That I'm just like, it's so good. It's just so evocative, and it just jumps off the page in a way that I think few other authors kind of manage.
Mm-hmm. I'd go through, like, if I find a good author, I like go crazy, and I read everything, and I immerse myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes for a year.
Yeah.
And that's just like what I do, and so I've read everything John Irving's ever written.
Mm-hmm.
I've read, well, obviously Harper Lee only wrote one book, and then they published another one after she died. That was like pre To Kill a Mockingbird.
Pre-Mockingbird.
But it wasn't like she didn't want it published, and so it wasn't.
Yeah.
I someone gifted it to me, and I never really opened it. I like read a few.
Yeah.
I cracked it, but I was just like, this is doing her a disservice, and she wouldn't want me to read this, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I read everything Stephen King's ever written, and then there's this like, I don't know if she's alive anymore, but she used to do like biographies on, famous people like Jack. There's one called Jackie O by Kitty Kelly. So everything by Kitty Kelly I've read. And yeah, that's basically like, I'll just kind of find an author and then go. Like, yeah, John Krakauer's another one. I've read everything he's, not that I'm bragging. It's more like I kind of get in this mania where I can't get out of it. So I'm not saying it's a good thing.
Okay, I like it. That's good. No, I know what you mean, and I know a lot of other people engage with authors in the same way. It's just not. I don't know. I'm like a easily distracted. I'm like a magpie. I'm just looking for other shiny things. Okay, before we wrap things up, do you have like any writing hot takes? We'll just go out with a bit of a controversial hot take.
Controversial. Yeah.
What do you got for me?
I guess like I had the longest book I've ever read, but also, and I wrote every Stephen King novel after he got a word processor. Like his early ones that weren't 500, 600 pages. Like that's where that was his sweet spot. Once he got a word processor, it was just like, trim it down. Too many notes.
Yeah, I hear you. It's some massive, like, I have no patience for them.
Yeah.
I've only read a handful of his stuff. In fact, that is kind of, because like, I think The Shining's not a very good book. I think it's because I came to it after the movie, and I think the movie is such an incredible masterpiece that I think the book couldn't possibly live up to that. Yeah. But like, so like I've always, and I've read some of his other stuff, and it just never has really worked for me. But I read the first 4 Dark Tower books. I fucking adored them. Yes. But everybody else who'd read all of those books basically told me to just stop there because they get much, much worse, and they actually kind of shit on everything that's come before. Yeah. So I was kind of happy with where I got and the kind of sort of end of the story that he got to with there,
Yeah, and like he does revisiting with some of his books where I liked The Shining. I feel like the book and the movie were 2 completely different things.
So different, yeah.
But then he wrote, and I don't remember the name of it, so everyone forgive me, but it was like Danny like 20 years later.
Oh, yes, because Dr. Sleep, it was turned into...
It didn't have to do with like the Kennedy assassination or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know.
Why do that?
Yeah, but I love him on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh no, I think he seems like a cool guy, and I like his Twitter presence as well. Yeah. I just like his general attitude. He seems like his head's in the right place. So yeah.
Yeah, and then the other longest book that I've ever read that was also one that like I couldn't quite finish was the Bible.
Beth, what? Right. Okay. The podcast's over. This is a Christian podcast, and if you can't read the Bible. It's not really a Christian podcast, people. I'm joking. Yeah, I love it. Okay, cool. Hopefully some stuff that'll get people angry. I barely even. I mean, like as I say, there's still so much I could talk about, and like
Yeah,
I have
a list.
and
Yeah.
I have an abiding love of like fantasy and sci-fi that I always dip into every
Yes.
now and again as well. That I didn't even really touch on, but for another episode, we
Agreed.
can talk about it another time.
Agreed.
But like, we'd love to hear recommendations of books that you're reading. Any and all genres. I
Yes.
think it would be fair to say.
Yes.
And just your thoughts on books generally would be great. But yeah, so we'll move into what's been bringing you joy this week.
The Boys on
The Boys.
Amazon. So I finished Dark Matter.
I've started watching it.
Okay. Let me know when you get to the point where you're confused, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Because I got to a point where I was like, I feel like I missed something here. And it has to do with quantum physics. So in some ways, and so
probably like my big smart quantum physics brain will have no problem.
Probably
with it,
you'll be like, I wasn't confused at all, and I'll be like, I was just trying. I said that to try and make you feel better, just in case.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Boys. So we blasted through all 6 episodes that are out right now, and it's just, I looked at who the executive producers are, and it's like Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like they're like hitting kind of like where South Park hits a little bit.
Yeah.
And just in a more creative, not a different creative way, talking about things that are actually happening in the world and making it, and just being like, this is super fucked up, but also superheroes.
Yeah.
So I'm really digging it. Episode 6 was something else.
It's been a great satire of like modern. I mean, like I obviously loved maybe the like Marvel movie machine, but it is really satirizing what it has become in great ways as well.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I've been really enjoying
super
that.
sad that I think they're only going to do 5 seasons.
Yeah.
And so next season's going to be the last.
I think that's. I honestly think it's a universe that's going to keep going. I think they're going to keep having spin-offs and stuff like that because it's been so successful for them. But I think that it feels like it's starting to like come to a natural conclusion anyway. So I'm always more in favor of a show ending in a good place rather than kind of like spinning its wheels for far too long.
I just the guy that plays Homelander, I've never seen anyone play such a good psychopath.
Yeah, he's so good.
Like, he's so good. Like, you can see when he's like trying to smile to like look like he's a real like nice human, and like how hard it is for him to actually do that as an actor. I'm just like, God damn, you're good.
I need to send you a.
Do you have a?
I'll do this. I'll do afterwards. A sketch he's in with Andy Donna. But
please.
Okay.
What about you?
So I've been enjoying. There's a BBC show I've been enjoying called Such Brave Girls.
Ooh.
Which was recommended to me. I'm really enjoying it. It's essentially like, about it's the actress that wrote it. It's her and her actual sister and an actress playing their mom, and they're kind of living together, and they're all like a complete mess, and they're just trying to like live their lives, but in kind of very disastrous ways. But like, I was immediately in love with it when one of the first scenes, their mother was like, look, I'm bringing a new man over, he's got lots of money, we need to keep him on site, he could be our ticket out of here, girls, okay, so don't do anything normal, do not talk about your depression, okay? And like, it's just a hard cut to her sitting beside him going, so they put me on mirtazapine, but I felt it only really masked the symptoms rather than actually having any sort of effect. And I was like laughing because I was like, that's the medication I'm on, that's how I feel about it. So it just does it plays with the whole sort of depression and sort of obsessive behavior in really kind of fun way. I like dark humor, I guess, stuff that like you know, because I think I've talked to you about this before as well. I think one of the problems I have when talking about mental health is that, like, you talk about it and people get so serious so fast. So I enjoy being able to joke about it. I think that's the best way to, like, take the sting out of it a bit, for me at least, anyway.
Yep.
So this is just, it's perfect for me. Perfect.
And it's called what again?
So such brave girls.
Such brave girls. Okay.
Which is such a great title, because, like, you know, it's that sort of really kind of patronizing thing that people say, oh, they're such brave girls. Yeah. Oh, you know, it's so patronizing. So it's very funny. So I'm really digging that.
Awesome.
But yeah. So yeah. So can you, before we wrap things up, can you tell people where we can be found, etc., etc.?
We are all over the place. We've got our shorts are getting a lot of attention on YouTube, so check us out on YouTube.
Oh, nice.
You could just search us for Bendy the podcast, and you can always find all of our channels and everything that we're up to on our website at bendypodcast.com.
Awesome.
Yes.
Great stuff, folks. So thanks for joining us as always, and we would like to remind you to
stay Bendy.
Awesome. So
Vocal
good.
fry was on point. Love you guys.
All right, we love you. Bye bye.